pay raise, or that jerk who just took the bumper off my car, or I hate this job, it's so boring. We get lost in our little provincial worries, but the world's a big place, and it's shot through with tremendous intelligibility. There's all kinds of intelligibility out there. Things worth noticing, things worth thinking about. This is another thing that's about children and asking questions. They ask a question, I've said children ask serious questions, always and most of the time. The presupposition of every question is that it makes sense to ask it. That is, you ask a question because you have some reason to think, some hope that through asking the question you will achieve some understanding. The world offers lots of possibility for understanding. We see this in the natural sciences, among the really good natural scientists, that they, you discover this thing, it's called a cell, and then you discover in bacterial cells and not bacterial cells, in one-celled organisms that have a nucleus and ribosomes, you discover that's just the beginning of the story. Every step of the way you go, you find, my gosh, there's more going on, even in this crummy, miserable little cell, than anyone ever dreamed of. It seems to me that philosophy, when it's good, is animated by an abiding confidence that there's lots of understanding to be had. I appreciated this about philosophy in a certain mode, that it was acutely aware of the test of self-reference, which the good philosophers don't fail. What's the test of self-reference? Often, when we make big claims about reality, we make those claims oblivious about our making of the claims. What do I mean by that? Well, the claim is, here's a simple claim. All human beings, at bottom, are driven by selfish needs. There's a big claim for you, right? It takes various forms, you've heard it before, right? Well, if that's true, then it must also be true that the human being who made that claim is also driven by selfish needs. And if he's driven by selfish needs, how do you know that his making that claim isn't, in fact, purely a function of his selfish need? And if it's purely a function of his selfish need, then why the heck should I pay any attention to it? I've got my own selfish needs to worry about, right? The test of self-reference is a test that thinking often fails. One of really the great revolution Socrates effected in philosophy was to bring philosophy down from the heavens, this according to Cicero, and make it investigate the human things. But not because in Socrates the ambition of philosophy shrunk, but rather because of Socrates' conviction that in the human we have a privileged access to the whole show. So we better do justice to the human experience of the human if we're going to make sense of anything. And finally, just mention this, I found in philosophy the pleasures of slow reading. We, especially now with the web, right? You spend 3 seconds on a page and you're through. Really good philosophy can't be read that way. You got to read it, and then you got to read it again, and you got to go slow, and you got to underline, and then you got to go back, and then you got to remember. And the great thing about it is, 3 years later you go back and you notice things you hadn't noticed before. The really good books are books to be chewed over, Nietzsche says, and digest it, not gulped down. So with some of the great teachers I had the pleasure of discovering that it was really possible, in my ambition to understand, also to understand people who seemed to think very differently from me, who did think very differently from me, who lived in very, very different circumstances than I did. 4th century Greece, right? Who were saying things that seemed kind of outrageous. However, by dwelling with them, by listening to them, I started to see that there was a sense to be had here. And it was really interesting. So, that's what happened to me. I'm still doing it, still happy to be doing it. Still hard. Gets harder in lots of ways. Maybe Bruno will want to talk about why any of you should bother with any of this. I think that was one of the things on the agenda. So, thank you.